So hello everybody, this is Garvin from Dublin Tour Guide. Today I'm going to be talking to a good colleague of mine based in Edinburgh, Scotland. Will Robb runs Iconic Tours and he offers private walking tours and driving tours all around Scotland. Today we're going to be talking about the most important historic event in Scottish history. So that is the most formative event in modern Irish history. If you wanted to understand what makes Scotland Scotland today, this event would be the one historical period that you would talk about. So, Will, thanks very much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So, in your opinion, Will, and I don't know if this is arguable, if this is how definitive this is, but what would you say is the most important historic event in Scottish history?
Well, for me, in the last few hundred years, I would have to go with the Jacobite rebellions. Now, I'm going to concentrate on the final rebellion, which was 1745 to 46, which has become very important recently because of a series of books and a TV show called Outlander, which I'm sure a lot of people will know about, but the history surrounding it's very, very important. Now, the first Jacobite rebellion actually goes back to 1689. We had a king, King James VII of Scotland, who became king when his brother died, Charles II. Now, Charles II was Protestant and James was Catholic. And the British government at the time was not very happy about having a Catholic king. We'd had several generations of Protestants, and it looked like James was going to give more power back to the Catholics. So the British government invited James's daughter and her husband, William of Orange, to come and take the power, which they did. Now, those loyal to King James, and the Latin for James is Jacobus, started a rebellion to try and put James back on the throne in 1689, which failed. And then there was another attempt in 1715, which also failed. If you fast forward to 1745-46, there was a rebellion that almost worked. Now, the first two rebellions failed fairly quickly, and the Jacobite cause was seen as a bit of a lost cause to many. The government was not worried about it at all. Most rebellions were almost over by the time it started. But 1745, we had Charles Edward Stuart, nicknamed Bonnie Prince Charlie, who was brought up in Italy and France, being told his destiny was to be King of Scotland and England. The United Kingdom belonged to him. Now, anybody that's seen the Outlander TV show will see him being portrayed as a bit of a crazy guy, and in many ways he was. He was really up and down all over the place. When he was up, he could persuade anybody to do anything. When he was down, it was all hell and everyone's damned. It was not a very good situation with the man. But he came over to Scotland, and when he came over with two boats. One was him and a few friends, none of whom could speak Gaelic, the national language of the Highlands, where he landed in Scotland. The other boat was full of highly trained soldiers from France. It had weapons and it had money to pay for the rebellion. Now, the boat with all the good stuff, the money, the soldiers, the guns, didn't make it through. It met a British blockade and was turned back to France. So Charlie turns up with a few of his friends in the Highlands, where he can't speak the language, and he met with some of the clan chiefs from the Highlands and instantly said, "You have tried before, it's not worked. It's not going to happen this time. Go back to France, leave us alone, and go and have your good life." But Bonnie Prince Charlie asked for some private time with one of the clan chiefs. And when he got that, he came back an hour later, and the clan chief was now saying, to change his tune, "We will now fight with Charlie. We will rise now." Because one clan chief is going to follow, all the other clan chiefs are going to start coming to the line. Not all of them would.
What was this year? No, again, just to remind everybody. What was the year?
Oh, sorry, the year. This is 1745. Right. So he started gathering the clans. It was August 15th in 1745. Now, you've got to bear in mind that in those times and now, the Highlands of Scotland, the lowlands, are divided. The Highlands, the area north of Stirling, going up towards the more mountainous region, hence the name the Highlands, was quite wild. You had the clan system, it's a feudal system. You have all these little groups, almost tribal groups living together. In central Scotland, Edinburgh, Glasgow area, like England, you had the law of the land that everyone would obey. In the Highlands, none of that mattered. Okay, so any problems within your little community would be sorted out by your clan chief, your feudal leader. Now, if you lived on clan land, your clan chief allows you to be there, and you're not necessarily paying a rent. You would give him some extra money if you had it. The thing was, you gave loyalty. Your clan chief asked you to fight. You do not question it. You fight. Now, you could be born into a clan. You could also join a clan just by showing loyalty to it. The word clan really means children. And that's what it's all about. It's all part of one family. You're in it together. Now, if you're a member of a clan in the Highlands and he says, we're now going to have another rebellion, we're going to follow this Bonnie Prince Charlie, you would do it without questioning. And before long, Bonnie Prince Charlie, he gathered a rather quite a significant army. He's going to have about 2,000 men, and they marched from the Highlands down towards Edinburgh. Now, Edinburgh was held by the British Army at the time, and they were a force to be reckoned with. Anywhere they thought they would win. Now, you have this army of Highlanders. Some of them are going to be farmers, some never had military experience before. You think it's going to be quite an easy little battle for you. But the Jacobites, they didn't really fight in the general way that the British would do. They didn't have the same tactics. They liked to surprise people. And one of their favourite tactics was something called a Highland Charge. Basically, run screaming at your enemy. Excuse me. And much to the surprise of the British, the Jacobites managed to take Edinburgh. And so, quite surprised, never managed that before. This ragtag army managed to take Edinburgh. Then they marched down to Carlisle over the border in England, and they took Carlisle. Then they marched down to Manchester. They took Manchester. They marched down to Derby, getting very near London's door now. They took Derby as well. Now, the king at the time, George II, who originally came, his family come from Germany, and they say he was packing his boat on the Thames to go back to Germany. He thought the Jacobites were going to come. They were going to take over all of the UK. But Bonnie Prince Charlie, he wants to move on to London. We have these clan chiefs from the Highlands of Scotland. You also have other people who have joined from lowland Scotland, from north of England. You have support from France, and you also have some soldiers from Ireland as well. Now, their goal, maybe to begin with, is secure Scotland. You know, have that as being, you know, just Scottish, because 1707 they became part of the United Kingdom, and they've got what they want. But Bonnie, they don't really want to take London. They have no interest. But Bonnie Prince Charlie is adamant: we need to go. We need to take London. So they send some spies down, check out the situation. Now, by this point, the Jacobites are almost 4,000 men. And the spies go down and come back and say, well, the British have 20,000 men waiting for us in London. What's more, they're pulling 15,000 soldiers out of the war in France back, and they're going to the north of Scotland. There's going to be a pincer movement. They're going to get us. We have to go back to Scotland. We have to consolidate our gains. Now, from August all the way through to the end of the year 1745, the Jacobites had been winning. Things are going well for them. But once they start coming back, it all starts to go wrong. The rations run out, their footwear gets worn out. You have men walking in bare feet. It's coming with the winter. They get to Glasgow. They force people to give up their footwear. They force people to give them money. They start to become unpopular with people in Scotland. They try to take Stirling Castle, which is still held by the British. They can't get in. They try and take various castles up the west coast of Scotland. They can't get in. They have a very harsh winter. People start to desert. And you finally get into the kind of end of winter in April of 1746. And there's going to be the last battle of the Jacobite Rebellion, which is the last battle on British soil. It was the Battle of Culloden, which took place on April 16th. Now, up until now, the Jacobites had always tried to surprise their enemy, come running, charging at them, and, you know, scare the heck out of the enemy, burst through enemy lines. You get support coming from the sides. You take them from all sides there. You can have some sort of victory. Now, when they're having these battles previously, the Jacobites always use the landscape to their advantage. Take the high ground, come out of the trees, make it hard for your enemy. But the Battle of Culloden didn't happen like that. The British made sure they were going to fight on nice flat land, and the British were great with artillery. They had lots of cannons, and the Jacobites had just got cannons for the first time, and they didn't really know how to use them. So you have an estimated maybe between 4,000 and 5,000 Jacobite soldiers, and then you have the British Army, which is going to be a greater number. You're talking about 8,000 to 9,000 men, and they're all professional soldiers versus the Jacobites. Now, when the Jacobites start using their artillery, they say they could fire off one cannonball in 6 minutes, which is not very good. They've not really trained with it, and each cannonball they fire off misses its mark.
Oh.
Now, the British, by contrast, can fire off 6 cannonballs per minute.
Oof, wow.
And each cannonball they fire off hits the target. So it takes out the Jacobite artillery, and it takes out a lot of the leaders in the Jacobite cause as well. So you have these soldiers, they're losing the leader, they're losing their heavy artillery, but they go for the Highland Charge. They run across, like flat land towards the enemy, screaming and shouting. They're going to have a rifle. They fire off the rifle once, throw it over their shoulder. They've got their bullet, it's gone. And then they've got their broadswords, they've got their shields against the British with their bayonets, with their muskets, the heavy artillery. Once they start the charge, the British start firing out shrapnel out of the cannons, which rips them to shreds. And although the Highland Charge is successful, it does get through the British lines. They don't get support coming from the sides, and it's an absolute massacre. Of the 4,000 or 5,000 Jacobites in the battle, in the first 45 minutes, an estimate that anything between 2,000 and 3,000 were killed.
Wow.
So, more than half killed in 45 minutes. The official figures for the British Army death go to about 50, which is probably exaggerated, written by the British afterwards. But regardless, the Jacobites have been heavily defeated. Now, there was something happened on the battlefield that still talked about today. It was a really terrible moment in British military history. Probably in British military history, quite a lot of terrible moments, but this was one of the big ones on British soil. So once the Jacobites have been defeated, they've surrendered. Normally, quarter is given to your enemy. You tend to the wounded, you bury the dead. But the commander of the British forces, the Duke of Cumberland, nicknamed the Butcher of Culloden after this battle, gave an order of no mercy for the Scots. If anybody fighting for the Jacobites was English, French, or Irish, they were to be given quarter. They were to be attended to. The Scots were to be killed. So they went about bayoneting people on the battlefield. And this went on for 3 days until all those they could find were killed. Then some people had managed to escape. So the British Army ruthlessly went round the local villages and towns, and they rounded up men who would have been of fighting age and had them executed. So it really was quite a horrendous, moment in history, and people often talk about that even now. Now, a lot of the Jacobites, as I mentioned, were composed of clansmen, and those that fought on the battlefield, they died there, they were executed there. A lot of that happened, but also because people escaped, they felt the need to round them up. So they'd go to where the clan land was. The clan chief, if they hadn't already been killed in battle or executed, he'd be arrested, he would go on trial, and he would be executed. No doubt about it. The clan chiefs that had fought were all executed. Now, 1 in 10 of the men that had been captured, they would execute. For the rest, they were sent into indentured servitude in the United States, quite often the Carolinas. So lots of people from Scotland, they might have been men, they might have been boys, sent to the Carolinas. And indentured servitude, slavery by another name, for a limited period. It could be 10 years, it could be 15 years. After that, they were free to return to Scotland or stay. Most people didn't have any money. They had to stay there. Excuse me. So you had this wave of people going over. Now, the clan chiefs that had lost, the land was now forfeit. And the land was sold off very cheaply. A lot of people had fought on the side of the British. They acquired the land very cheaply, and you had these people, you had the women and children still living on land. Now, under the old clan system, you're not really paying a rent as such. You might give some extra money if you have. If you've got extra produce from your little plot of land, you would give it to your clan chief. Now, this way doesn't work for people that are used to being paid a rent. So they figured out to get rid of the people, replace them with sheep. Sheep are going to make a lot of money. You have all this grazing area, but you have to get the people off the land. And the people, they were asked to go, but they didn't know where to go. They've been there for generations. You know, they were told, go to the cities, get a job, go to the coast, become fishermen, but they had no skills in that. They were farmers. And when they didn't go, they were forced. And it was a period known as the clearances, which kind of ties on to the back of the Jacobite Rebellion. People are pushed off the land. Some people were killed on the land because they wouldn't leave. Their houses were burned down around them. And the people did have to move down towards the cities. The cities became overcrowded, and there's not enough jobs. And eventually, these people have to start going overseas. They make their way to the United States. They make their way to Canada. And a number that's often passed about now is Scotland. We have a population of just under 6 million people. But if you look at the people in America and Canada, even now adding in Australia and New Zealand, there's 25 million people of Scottish descent living in those countries. So compared to what we have here, you know, there's a much larger number overseas. And if you look at a lot of the place names in America, the United States, and Canada, a lot of them, the place names from here. You know, I'm from Edinburgh, and quite often American tourists will pronounce it as Edinburgh, Edinburgh, because in America, you have places the exact same spelling as our city here, with different pronunciations. There's actually 4, I would say, Edinburghs in the United States of America.
Where are they?
One of the most, quite a few in the kind of the southern area of the United States of America. And you've got Loch Lomond and things. Just last year, I was doing a driving tour to Loch Lomond because the women said, it's my local loch in the United States. And it's actually a man-made loch. I'd love to go there.
Right.
So we're driving there, and we're going through little villages. And she's like, oh my God, these are the exact same names as the villages nearby our Loch Lomond as well. And it's amazing to think that these Scots, they start moving over to the Americas. They take the place names with them.
Yeah.
But then when you get the
Can't take the
American
lake,
Wars of
so they make one.
So don't have it there, so they make one. But you know, a lot of these Scots as well, they got involved in the American Wars of Independence, fighting against the British, you know. And some of the founding fathers of modern America, those who signed the Declaration of Independence, actually came from Scotland. And you know, people often talk about, you know, the Declaration of Independence in America and how there should be no taxation without political representation. That was actually a Scotsman.
Who was that?
Oh God, I'm just my mind went blank now. Oh crikey, I should know that. Tell people.
Was John Adams one of the Scottish descendants?
No, John Adams wasn't one of them. Yeah, they got a guy. John Knox Witherspoon was one of the guys that signed it. James Wilson is the man that came up with there should be no taxation without political representation. Became good friends with George Washington. George Washington made him chief of the Department of Law at Philadelphia University afterwards. So I like to think that, you know, off the back of the Jacobite rebellions, you have this big movement of people, you know, to the Americas, United States, to Canada. They're taking a lot of the culture with them. They're taking a lot of the education system, the way of thinking from Scotland over there, and it's making big changes in those countries as well. And in all honesty, you know, you look at United States and Canada now, there's probably a lot more people there who are proud of their Scottish heritage, who go to the Highland Games, who take part in all these Scottish activities than you do people living in Scotland. So
which cities or regions would you be able to, in North America, would you be able to attend the Highland Games?
All over. A lot of it is on the West Coast. I've heard a lot of people from the West Coast talking about that as well. But yeah, West Coast as well. You know, people made their way right across there, and yeah, so I always find that interesting that, you know, a lot of my customers personally, you know, they're coming to Scotland because they have a personal link to Scotland with their family heritage. You know, their great grandfather was from here, great grandfather, you know, they trace back where their family was from in Scotland. And quite often we end up going to places that, you know, their ancestors came from. And I always love that. And, you know, more than often than not, it's people coming for the first time. It's, you know, a trip of a lifetime for them, and to be able to share that is great. And when we talk about things like the Jacobite Rebellion, when we talk about the movement of people, it all starts to click with them, and it starts to fall into place why they got to where they were. You know, was it from the Jacobite Rebellion itself? Or was it from the events immediately afterwards with the Highland clearances? You know, what was it that pushed their family to go there? And it just gives them a bit more insight. So for me, that's what makes it such an important thing.
Hmm. And were the clearances, was that the only time that such clearances took place in Scottish history? Because in Ireland,
Yeah,
we had several conquests by the English. So you had
yeah,
the Cromwellian campaign in the middle
yeah,
of the 1600s, and
mm,
then you had the War of the Three Kings at the end of the 1600s. And both
mm,
of those involve the supplantation of the native Gaelic Catholic Irish
mm,
with a Protestant, generally British people. So
yeah,
those families were brought
yeah,
in. And so
mm,
that happened several times. So we can't,
mm.
we quote a few different historical events um,
Okay, yeah,
as the reason why people were moving further and further to the west in
mm,
Ireland, further and further to the worst land.
mm,
And then when the most important event in Irish history took place, the Great Famine in the 1840s, the relatively overpopulation of the west coast of Ireland, or
mm,
the western half of Ireland with its poorer land, meant that these people who were already struggling to survive on the
mm.
poorer land there, once things got slightly worse, everything got a hell of a lot worse. So
Yeah, yeah.
in Scotland, were there similar clearances at different points of time?
No, not really. It
Hmm.
was after the Jacobite Rebellion, because until then, the Highlands were the domain of the clans. You know, there was no messing with them.
Difficult to
And
get in there.
yeah, it was difficult to get in, and it was actually General Wade who I believe fought in some of the campaigns in Ireland. He was given the task of building roads in the Highlands before the last Jacobite rebellion, before anyone knew about that, just to make it more accessible for the British Army, and that's really what helped them. It allowed them to get ahead of the Jacobites, who knew the lay of the land, who could run up the hills through the forest in little tracks, but didn't allow the British Army to move effectively. But once they had roads, they could just go all the way through there. But yeah, the clearances were just after the Jacobite Rebellion, but that period continued for a good 80 years or so. It
Hmm.
was some places it was very quick, some places it was quite gradual, and it was all, and even now, a lot of the landowners there, it's people who had sided with the British, who managed to
Hmm.
acquire land. And there's another statistic that goes around of the 453 wealthiest landowners in Scotland. Only one of them Scottish,
Right. Yeah.
and
Sorry, that's
it's
a
not.
record from the time, is it?
Yeah, so this is about now, because a
Oh, right.
lot of these big areas
Hmm.
of land that were owned by clan chiefs were taken over by people, and usually people with links to the British Army at the time. But over time, has been sold now. Quite international. The chap that owns ASOS, the online clothing company, a guy from Denmark, the richest man in Denmark, he owns the largest chunk of land in Scotland.
Wow.
Yeah, so, which is quite odd when you
There's
think
gotta
about it.
there's
But
gotta be
again,
some Hamlet reference there. And he wants
yeah,
he wants to buy like the neighboring peninsula, but
mm,
some other fella owns that, and he's trying to take it over. And he's marching
yeah,
his solicitors
yeah.
towards it. Oh, that's
I
interesting.
know, but
So, I
yeah,
mean, I'm very curious. I want to obviously ask you a load of questions about it. But just
yeah,
talking
go
about the
for it.
Scottish that went to North America. So,
Mm,
and just a little side note here, some of them came to Northern Ireland first. So some of them
yeah,
came to
yeah,
the mainly British, the mainly Protestant part of the north of Ireland, before making their way on to North America. And it's quite interesting because some of them may have come 100 years prior. So in other words, they came in the early 1600s, or they came after the Cromwellian campaign in the middle of the 1600s, or they came at the end of the 1600s, and then subsequently, went to North America. So generally in the 1700s, we have quite a few people from the north of Ireland, from Scottish descent, who have made their way on to North America. And in Ireland, there is some, there's some evidence to suggest that you could track the movement of people from different parts of Ireland to different parts of North America. So good example is, Cork, which was in the south of Ireland, which was the last port of call for the Titanic in 1912. So people, coming from England, got the ship from England, and it would stop in Cork, and people from all around that area in the south of Ireland would hop on the boat and head off to New York or Boston. So, and then also ships were coming from Galway, and then ships might also be coming from Glasgow, and they'd be going across from Glasgow to Derry. And where I'm from is Donegal, which is in the north of Ireland, though it's in the Republic of Ireland. So in Ireland, we say that, Northern Ireland's called the north, so the Republic of Ireland's called the south. So Donegal, it's in the north, but it's in the south. It's the most northerly county, but it's in the Republic of Ireland. It's in the south. So people from Donegal would go to Derry and get a ship and head off and arrive in Canada, right? So, the geography determined which part of the east coast of North America you would arrive. And it's funny because I think a lot of people are assuming that Nova Scotia in Canada is named after Scotland. And I think this is a great point for us to talk just briefly. We'll try to keep it brief about the word Scot.
And
what
which means Irish.
Okay, so let's take it from there. Go on, tell us.
Yeah, because it's, if you look at, in Scotland, we're all called Scots now. Now, for this period of history, you've got to go really back to the 800s when we have the first king of Scots. Now, prior to that, you have the Pictish people, the painted people who fought against the Romans. You had the Angles coming, you had the Vikings, but from the kind of the 4th century onwards, you have a lot of Scots who, in the name of people living in the island of Ireland now, they came over to what is now Scotland, which is going to be called Caledonia back in the day. Now, they became the most powerful group. And the kind of last king of the Picts was the first king of the Scots, a guy called Kenneth MacAlpine. He had family on both sides, mother and father, Pictish, Scottish. And with all these different tribes living there, and just to bring them all together under one banner, they were given the name the Scots. And there was the ties between the land of Caledonia, now Scotland, and what is now Ireland.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, as you said, Scots or Scotia in Latin was the name for the Irish. And of course, when the Romans were in Britain, their experience was with the Scotia, was with the Irish people rather than the Pictish people of ancient Scotland. And so they called Ireland Scotia. And then when some of the Irish somewhat colonized the west coast of what is Scotland, that became known as Scotia Minor. So you had Scotia Major and you had Scotia Minor. And as time went on, Scotia Major eventually was known as, had another name, Hibernia. And as you said, Scotland was known as Caledonia, but it still kept the Scotia part, right? So that's land of Scots. Scotland is land of Scots. And Nova Scotia means land of New Scotland, which is kind of, it's a bit of an interesting, convoluted way of naming the place. It's very confusing, isn't it? And of course, there's a bit of a back and forth between the Irish and the Scottish about it, because, of course, we would say, "Oh yeah, sure. What does Scot mean? Yeah, it means Irish people. He came from us." And then you can go, oh no, it's from dead Scot, which means of the highest
Yeah.
quality, of the best caliber. And then we would say, oh no, it's from Ska, which is a type of flower. It's a pansy.
Mm.
So you're a bunch of pansies. That's what we would say.
Yeah,
So we
yeah,
had this going back and forth
yeah.
between the people. Well, basically all the etymologists, all 17 of them.
Yeah, but
So
I think there's so many big links between what is now Scotland and Ireland.
yeah,
Going back, several thousand years. It's great, and I love all these things that tie in.
yeah, we could talk for hours.
Oh yeah, go off on
So
tangents, but it'd be great. Yeah,
maybe we'll just finish up,
yeah,
and we'll just actually just circle back to that question about if you know where anybody, if they left Glasgow on a boat, would they get to somewhere else than if they left Edinburgh or any other part of Scotland?
yeah. Most
So in the
people leaving.
1700s, they went to the Carolinas,
Yeah,
as you said.
yeah,
But
because I go to
as
Carolinas. Now, a lot of that is because after the Jacobite Rebellion, if you're in indentured servitude, you go in the Carolinas because of all the tobacco and cotton plantations. Because again, people on the side of the British Army who had won, a lot of them are wealthy landowners, and their wealth comes from their plantations. So they need workers to go there, and that's why a lot of them ended up in the Carolinas.
right,
So
and
the routes to get there, I'd imagine, would kind of go probably through like the West Indies, and then have to go across land a bit to get, or they go all the way down around South America. I'm not quite sure how they would do that, the actual route itself. But then later on, after the clearance, it's more like the route going via Ireland to New York, Boston type areas as well.
okay, very good. Okay, so we understand that the Jacobite Rebellion, the second one, right?
Mm-hmm. Third one, final
Third
one,
one.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the most important one. So it's very odd that,
Mm.
because sometimes the sequels are just as good as the original, but you're saying that the
Yeah,
third one
yeah.
is the one to remember
Uh,
here.
so I think I've talked about people going all over the world from Scotland, but also the way Scotland's been viewed in itself changed as a result. Because probably prior to the Jacobite Rebellion, I do honestly imagine people living in the more lowland areas, central areas of Glasgow, Edinburgh, they probably looked down upon the Highlanders a bit. They kind of country bumpkins. They're a bit lawless. They're a bit wild. It'd be quite scary going up to the Highlands. But then, 60 years after the rebellion, we had one of the most famous writers from Scotland, Sir Walter Scott. He wrote a book called Waverley, which romanticised the Highlands. Now, the book is about the last Jacobite rebellion. The main character, Edmund Waverley, is an officer in the British Army, but he's got a double influence in his life. His father is in the government in Westminster. His uncle fought in the previous Jacobite rebellion of 1715, which would be quite common. Your families were divided by the Jacobite cause. So in the book, Waverley's posted up to the Highlands pre-final rebellion. He has leave from the army. He visits a friend of his uncle who's a wealthy old Jacobite landowner, falls in love with his daughter. She takes him through the misty forest at night, reciting poetry in Gaelic and translating it into English. Which you also had, Bonnie Prince Charlie appears. He's wearing his kilt, he's wearing his tartan. And people got interested in this side of Scottish culture because after the Jacobite Rebellion, the speaking of Gaelic was banned. The Gaelic of the clans was banned. The wearing of tartan was banned. Even playing bagpipes was banned under threat of death for 47 years. Now, in Scott's book, the Highlanders became these romantic figures. Like they write poetry. They're they're heroic. They'll do anything. And it really created this image of beauty in the Highlands. And that's what started something we call the Tartan Revival. So this kind of romanticized image of the Highlands and the people who live there. And now in Scotland, when we wear kilts, you have like dress kilt hunting tartans and all these kind of things, which they wouldn't have had back in the day. It's we've got a real kind of modern version of it now, but we've romanticized the past a lot. So I think it's interesting how that changed the view of Scotland. And you go back to the 1860s, Thomas Cook, the world's first travel agent, they're bringing people from London up to Edinburgh and then up to the Highlands. And then it's only just 100 years after the Jacobite Rebellion, really, and it still seems to be a bit wild in the Highlands. but it's going up and enjoying all these things. Queen Victoria liked to travel to the Highlands. You know, she bought property, Balmoral Estate there, that the royals still go and visit now. And because the royals are going to visit, people want to follow in their footsteps. And even now, you know, people still go these same routes the royals went. So yeah, there's, you know, impact over the world, impact in Scotland. A lot of tourism started off the back of that.
Hmm. So that's interesting. It's like it all ties into each other, isn't it? One
Yeah,
event,
all
the
ties in.
writing of that book changed, and
Yeah.
it changed. So this is interesting because it changed from the outside, which happens quite often, because in Scotland, most people weren't reading the book, and even if they were reading the book, the Waverley book, they were, you know, they had a context from which to go on. They already had a view and opinion of the Highlands, so it didn't have a big impact on them. Whereas someone reading that down in England could look up to, you know, far off land, obviously relatively at the time, and you know, romanticize it, as you say, and, you know, bring that to Scotland, and that helps kind of revive Scottish pride and Scottish self-esteem, which at the time must have been quite low, since all of these cultural pillars were being removed, and, you know,
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Scotland was falling down. So it's very interesting that happened, because that didn't happen in Ireland, unfortunately. And it's much more difficult to pull yourself out of the quicksand than for someone else to throw you a stick and help you out. So unfortunately, in Ireland, there wasn't the same revival of clothing anyway. There were other revivals, and it happened at the end of the 1800s. It happened much later. And so anyway, but the Battle of Culloden, I suppose, is the most important battle in Scottish history. Would other people agree? Does everyone learns about this in school?
I think we all learn about it in school, and I think for Scots, you know, when you go and visit Culloden the first time, or for me, you know, all the times afterwards, there's always a sense of sadness, because, you know, this romanticized image we have of the Highlands, this image of the clans, it all came to an end on that battlefield, you know. And it could have went a completely different way. And if things had went differently, you know, if they had won, you know, Scotland might have been independent. They might have got out of the Union way back then, just after they joined it.
So
the
that
Highland
was
way of
really
life,
the last rebellion by the Scottish. 1745,
it really,
1746.
yeah,
And
it really
do you
was, you know,
think
because it
that
was.
was because of the strength of the Highlanders was weakened so much? Because the
By
lowlands
the
had been quite anglicized, you know, from the
you know,
1500s, right?
because, you know, they had become more and more, you know, part of, you know, the island of the United Kingdom, and, you know, the Highlands was holding out. You know, in a way, again, it's the Highlanders. They were so loyal to the old line of kings, the Stuart royals, you know, Bonnie Prince Charlie, and the Catholic faith as well, because, you know, 1560 we had the Protestant Reformation in Scotland that became illegal to be Catholic, but the Highlands religion still persisted. You know, Catholicism still, you know, would last out there. So for the Highlanders, it's about, you know, keeping their way of life. It's about keeping their religion in some ways as well. And once, you know, we had the Act of Union in 1707 when we become part of the United Kingdom, there's big changes. You know, people were being taxed heavily on beer and whiskey production. The price of beer overnight went from 2 pence a Scotch pint to 6 pence a Scotch pint. And, you know, we were having to pay a lot of heavy taxes to the United Kingdom, and a lot of people were not happy about that. A lot of people losing out in money. They're feeling they're being trampled on by the government in London. And, you know, that was, in a way, the last big chance for Scotland to get out of that that Act of Union.
So do people in the last decade or so, you know, in light of the Scottish referendum and, you know, the momentum that Scottish independence has been generating over those last dozen or so years, do people think back, or people, you know, feel back to the Battle of Culloden and somewhat a sense of unfinished business? Obviously, not in the
Mm.
case, not in the vein of retaliation or revenge, but just
Mm.
doing what's right for Scotland. You know, to,
Yeah, I think people will look back on that, and then events that have happened subsequently to the Battle of Culloden, where I think a lot of Scottish people, if you look throughout a lot of history, since then, it feels Scotland's always, like, for example, put into battle first in world wars, and the Scottish regiments going first. They're the cannon fodders.
yeah.
Trying out, in the 1980s, the poll tax, trying out this new tax for the UK in Scotland only.
Oh.
Um, yeah, and so I think that was a big thing in Scotland. A lot of people attribute Maggie Thatcher and the poll tax with the
Oh, yeah.
resurgence and feelings of Scotland being independent.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think they
interesting.
would
You look
say
at
the same in a lot of places in England.
yeah. So yeah, it's quite interesting. I think it's just this feeling that in Scotland now that London doesn't really look on Scotland as an equal player in
Yeah.
the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Like we're second best somehow. Although we contribute quite a lot, and I think that's another topic we could go into for a long time as a tangent. But yeah, I think people who look back in all this history and see, well, Scotland's maybe been hard done by in some ways, and they maybe looking out for themselves a bit more now.
Yeah. And well, things seem like they're going in the right direction. All right, well,
Yes.
we're going to leave it at that. So just to remind everybody, Will Rob does private walking tours of Edinburgh and
Yep.
St Andrews, and
Yep.
he
And St
does
Andrews.
driving tours all over the rest of Scotland. So
Yeah.
you do Highland tours, and tell us a little
Highland
bit more if I missed anything.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. So basically, that most of our tours are customized in some ways. We'll have different places we go, whether it's the beauty of Glencoe, whether it's this Trossachs and Central Highlands. If you want to see castles, whiskey distilleries, things that's personally interested in, we'll make it all work to suit. So there's always a nice little bit of back and forward in the emails, what's interesting, put an itinerary together, and it can be anything from a day trip to sometimes we're away for like 9 or 10 days. Going to the Isle of Skye, up to Orkney, wherever people have an interest, some kind of family heritage they'd like to visit. We just want to make sure they're the best time in Scotland and get to visit the good local places, the places the big tour buses don't go to. Get a kind of nice insider's view to Scotland.
Because you have you take small groups, so you got a vehicle.
Yeah, so we just do private tours. So it's people come, usually just family and friends that they're traveling with.
So how many
can
people?
all be. We usually do 8 people maximum. We do more. We just have to hire a bus. We have our own vehicles that set up to 8 people that we regularly use. But sometimes it'll be 30 or 40 people, sometimes even more. And we just collaborate with a bus company. We'll get a bus. We'll get a driver. We'll have the guide, and we go and do our thing.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks very much. What I'll do is I'll put a link to the website and everything else in the social media in the description of this video. And
excellent.
I will. I'll talk to you next time, because I think we have a lot of things to talk about. It'd be great to.
Yeah, I think next time we'll have to talk more about the Irish side of things.
Ah, yeah, well, sure. You know, when you get me started, I won't be able to shut up. So we'll have to have so many names for the video. All right. Well, thanks very much, and thanks everybody else for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this. If you found it interesting, please share it with your friends and family to get them excited about going to Scotland and booking a private guide, because the real way to properly experience a city or a foreign country is to meet with a local who can really connect you with the land, its history, its culture, and its people. And so when you're planning your trip to Scotland, think of Will Rob, think of iconic tours out of Edinburgh. My name is Garvin Rush from Dublin Tour Guide. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.